Hello. Well, a lot of people are going to be doing political analyses of the Trump-Biden debate, but the fact is, it wasn't really a debate, was it? It was the Thanksgiving dinner from hell, where Uncle Don and Uncle Joe, and Uncle Joe were shouting at each other across the table. I half expected one of them to pull out a turkey leg and sling it across, maybe upend stuff and stalk off. But that's exactly how it felt. Now, The Guardian has it that Chris Wallace faced criticism, it says here, as he struggled to referee the first presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden on Tuesday night. But there wasn't really any way of dealing with this, was there? Sorry, I've got a little problem with the microphone there. I think I've sorted it out now. There wasn't really any way of dealing with it because Trump was, as is his wont, breaking the rules. And so real debate was not possible with Trump because he wasn't prepared to stick to the rules. On the other hand, neither was Biden, because he kept doing things in a more subtle way. He kept, well, first of all, he started off by calling Trump a liar, and then he kept on coming up with divisive stuff like, people like Trump. He didn't name Trump. People like various people look down on people like me, Catholic boy brought up in Scranton, so he was working there on the working class stuff. And there was another thing I noticed, and I'm sorry, it slipped my mind right now. But that doesn't matter. I mean, the fact is that Biden was going on this I'm being looked down on, this underdog thing. And that was also, there was no rule about that, but obviously that was wrong. And I just wonder if Trump countered that with a very small slip he made. I want to see what minute he did it. Let's see, just a minute. Let's see if I can find where that was. I'm trying to give you the minute. No. Oh, here we are. It was about a minute 1 and 35 seconds or something like that. Trump said something like, you called them super predators and you've called them a lot worse. That's what Trump said. But the first time he said that, he didn't quite pronounce it that way. He said, you called them super predators and you've called them a lot worse. And then the next time he used the word worse, he said worse again. But that voice, I thought, either that was him, being a little tired, a little, on the back foot, and he slipped into Brooklynese, or he put that in just a little bit to remind his working class voters that he really was one of them. I wouldn't put it past him to have made that mistake deliberately. Then I heard that voice, I thought, that reminded me of that Brooklyn elocution test that I learnt when I was a student in on the West Coast, actually, but, there were people there from the East Coast. And it goes like this, for those who don't know it. Toily poiple boyd sitting on a coib eating doily worms, which means, to the uninitiated, 30 purple birds sitting on a curb eating dirty worms. All right, but that's Trump, and I was impressed by that. Now, what else do I have here in my notes? When Trump, at about 57, 55 or something like that, Trump started talking about law and order. And for the first time in the debate, Biden didn't interrupt. And he didn't interrupt because, of course, he couldn't interrupt. Now, a friend of mine who lives in Israel tells me that at least one Israeli radio station said they reckoned the debate had been a draw. Maybe it's because I'm more partial to Trump than Biden. I felt like Trump had he made more sense. Biden kept saying, now, here's the deal. And then he kept on repeating himself as well. He'd say something like, let's see, we've got to take better care of our environment. We've got to take better care of our environment. And he did that a lot. And it seemed to me he was doing that to fill in the space while he collected his thoughts. Whereas Trump, for all his faults of not following the rules, when he spoke, went in a straight line. He didn't have to stop to collect his thoughts. As a matter of fact, his thoughts just poured out of him. And that was one thing Biden did that I noticed. And then apart from the fact, sort of I'm the underdog, people like Trump look down on me, which is, of course, total nonsense. And then this repetition habit he has. And then the other thing of pointing to the audience and telling them, vote, vote. Now, Trump never did that. And this is a debate. So occasionally you'd see Biden very coherently go into an election speech. There'd be long passages of what amounted to a direct address to you, the voter. I found it rather rude, actually. This is a debate, not an election address. And that's what he was doing. But those were the times when he was speaking most cogently and most fluently. And I can assume that that's because he's been very heavily rehearsed. And I'm sure he was running on automatic there. At least that's the feeling I got. As I said, I don't pretend to be impartial here. I went into this better disposed to Trump than to Biden because I think that Biden is not competent to be a president. On the other hand, Trump was a rule breaker and he didn't stick very well to the format either. But then you see, that's what got him the sort of deals he's got with foreign governments. And it's terrifying. I wouldn't like to have to negotiate with him. And it puts you off guard straight away. And kudos to Biden. He wasn't rocking back on Trump's onslaughts. He wasn't making much sense when he came back at him, when he answered him, but he was not showing any signs of fear. And I think Trump was rather nervous. That's the feeling I got. But when you're, Trump's answer to being nervous was to go on the attack. And I think, I'm not excusing him, by the way, I'm just saying, I think that's what was going on. Now, there was only one time when Trump made no sense, and that was at about 1 hour, 12 minutes and something like 35. And it seemed to me he was showing signs of tiredness. He was talking about how many judges he'd put in place after Obama had gone. And there was, I think he said 128 judges were missing. And of course, this would mean the courts would slow down and the judges left would be overworked and all the rest of it. And that's a reasonable thing for him to say. But actually, it took a while for me to understand that because he hadn't sorted out. And he said what he wanted to say. It didn't come out right, and he had to reverse and come back at it again, and then it became clearer. But yes, after about 1 hour 12, he was starting to show a little bit of tiredness. But you see, he talked figures, whereas Biden's response to that thing about the judges was, under this president, we've become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided and more violent. That's not facts. That's Biden's opinion, but it doesn't give you any idea of what was really going on. That's what Biden says about America. And I don't think that's true, actually. let's see, climate change, yeah, rainforest. And then, oh yeah, Biden said, yeah, what we've got to do is stop people cutting down the rainforests. And then he said something about, let's go to the people who are cutting down the rainforest and say, look, here's $20 billion, stop cutting down the rainforest. Well, you know, the American taxpayer might have something to say about that, because that $20 billion could go into healthcare or refurbishing the military or whatever. So I'm not sure that was a good idea, because I'm quite sure a lot of people would have thought $20 billion just to give away to a foreign country that's not conducting itself very well. Why? You see, the fact is that Brazil doesn't need to cut down the rainforest. If it were properly governed, then they could use their resources in a more sympathetic way. But there are lots, and it's not just, by the way, it's not just Brazil. There are African rainforests as well, and Indonesian rainforests. I mean, there's a whole band of rainforests, and they're all being cut down by governments that are corrupt and under-representative of the people. And you can give away all the money in the world, and it will not end up in the trees. It'll end up in the pockets of the corrupt officials. You have to be very careful about where you give your money and to whom. He made a good point about methane, Biden that is, at 1 minute 22:46. And he started off good, and then he started to sort of peter out. Again, the argument started off well. It's like he'd been given a bullet point, and then I just on my notes here, he starts to peter out. Now, if I could play it, you'd be able to see that, but I'm giving you the minutage, and you'll have to look it up for yourself. So that was around 1:22:46. He started talking about methane, and then it sort of drivelled a bit. And then whole sections of towns are blown away, and he blames it on global warming, and it didn't, you know, and that's a very typical sort of thing that Biden and all the left do. You pick on one thing. Yeah, the globe might be warming. We don't know, actually, because I've seen graphs, depending on when you start the graph, that show different things. But even if it is warming, America is not one of the main responsible countries for the pollution that might be causing this. That's the first thing. It's China again. It's India, as Trump pointed out. And the important thing is to marshal the resources you've got. Like over here in Britain, there's been a couple of instances where whole villages, towns have been completely flooded out. And people have said, well, it's global warming, you know, rising water table or whatever. But the point is, it's because of overpopulation. And they're building houses because people need somewhere to live, and they're building them on floodplains. If you go to there was a farmer I was speaking to, and this road kept getting flooded, and the council came in and they put gravel all the way down the side of the road to, you know, so the water would run down, and the road's even more flooded now. And he said to me that the problem was that oldies there in that town knew that the water went across the road, and it always did that. There was a river further down the hill, and the water was seeking its level down there, and it was always going to go across the road. And if the engineers had asked the locals, then they would have put some sort of a ford or a channel or maybe a pipe under the road or something like that to direct the water down there. But they didn't ask. And that's the problem with a lot of these things, where you get towns being blown away. Why do they put them in tornado paths? Fine. If they have to, then they should make sure that the places are built in such a way that they don't get damaged by tornadoes. You can develop an architecture that will survive such natural assaults. You see, so it's not, we have science. The thing about saying, oh, global warming, give up. You see, that's not it. Global warming, let's fix how we live. let's build houses that don't need so much air conditioning, like halfway into the ground where it's a bit cooler, you know, all that sort of thing. But no, they're just sort of global warming, fewer cars. People aren't going to go for fewer cars, especially in America. And Trump was talking about that too. He was saying that, you know, the fact is when you make cars more expensive, people hang on to the old cars, the least efficient cars. And he has a point there. All right. Then they talked about electoral integrity. And of course, Trump brought up that thing about a whole load of military votes being found in a ditch or something, waste paper baskets, that sort of thing. Yeah, and right. And then right at the end, Biden made this 2-minute campaign speech. And then Chris Wallace was asked, Chris Wallace asked Biden, would you accept the ballot? And Biden fudged a bit. All right, and I sat through 1.5 hours of that, and I just want you to appreciate that it was a great sacrifice. And as a matter of fact, my husband is going to be walking around in crumpled T-shirts for the next week because I didn't have time to iron them. Yeah, what happened was I went to the washing machine this morning with a whole load of stuff from the bathroom. I opened the washing machine door and the washing machine was full of laundry from about 2 days ago. That happens a lot. And then I had to sort that out. Right. Well, there's another debate at that was at Case Western Reserve University, and there'll be one in Utah, Salt Lake City, the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, between Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. And actually that might be more interesting. Mike Pence is definitely a rules man, so I can see him being a little less combative. And I can imagine Kamala Harris, who was, after all, a lawyer, being a lot tougher and making a lot more sense than Biden. No, I'm not making that much sense now. And just to finish off with, here's the little comment from the Guardian. The Fox News host Chris Wallace faced much criticism as he struggled to referee the first presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden on Tuesday. I don't think Chris Wallace did a bad job. I don't think he could have done any better job the way those two were carrying on. Many viewers blame Wallace, though it was Trump who most often broke the agreed rules of the debate, for sure, refused to stick to his own speaking time and steamrolled over both the other men. Yes, and that's why he's a good president. So long as the Constitution holds him back on doing the same thing with the button. That was a hot mess inside a dumpster fire inside a train wreck, said CNN's chief Washington correspondent Jake Trapper. That was the worst debate I have ever seen. Well, it actually wasn't a debate. As I said, it was a Thanksgiving dinner from hell. In fact, it wasn't even a debate. It was a disgrace, and it's primarily because of President Trump. Well, no, because although Trump was breaking the rules one way, Biden was breaking them another way. It was just a different way. That was the worst presidential debate I've ever seen in my life, said ABC political anchor George Stephanopoulos. The former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill tweeted, Chris Wallace is embarrassing and trying to pretend that the problem isn't 100% Trump. Well, it wasn't 100% Trump because Biden talked over Trump as well. The only problem is Biden didn't have the personal strength, what the Chinese call the key to actually cut through Trump. It wasn't that he didn't try. Again and again, as Trump interrupted Biden, Wallace could be heard in the background saying, Mr. President, trying to get Trump to wait his turn. All right, well, that's it. That was my impression of the Trump-Biden fight. And I'm not so, it might be interesting to see how Pence and Kamala Harris differ in their styles. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share, share, share.